In the divine realm, many gods and goddesses had gathered for a rare promotion event. The difficulty of the promotion mission would be S rank, and the lucky deity chosen for this mission was none other than the healing goddess Rista. Amid the cheers of the other deities, Rista merely smiled politely, promising she would try her best to accumulate enough experience to pass the test. But as soon as the ceremony ended, she rushed straight home. Rista leaned against her door and slumped down, her face pale. What a joke to assign her an S-rank mission. To explain more about this place. This was the upper realm, and Rista had been born here over 100 years ago. Her job up until now had been to summon heroes to save worlds in danger, and so far, she had done this 5 times. For other deities, 5 times wasn't many. Average gods had already done it more than 10 times, while veteran deities had saved over 100 worlds, and now she had an S-rank mission. Rista had never witnessed one before, only heard about them worlds so desperate that even the veteran gods found them daunting. How was she supposed to handle this? Rista felt utterly dejected. Quickly pulling herself together, she sat at her desk. Rista decided to choose a young man from Japan as her hero, since the isekai trend was currently popular there, making it easier to explain things to him. She began flipping through documents, looking at candidate after candidate, but despite the abundance of options, no one seemed quite right. Frustrated, she flipped her desk over and collapsed on the floor. Just then, an information sheet floated down onto her face. It contained the personal details of a young man named Seiya. Just reading through it briefly impressed Rista tremendously despite being only level 1. His stats were extraordinarily high. Rista's eyes lit up. Seiya was 1 in 100 million. With someone like him, she would soon be promoted to a great goddess. Rista immediately began preparing the summoning ritual. After a flash of light, Seiya appeared before Rista. His appearance made her heart skip a beat. What was this? How could this man be so handsome? With his jet black hair and perfect height, Rista almost started drooling. Then she remembered that love between gods and humans was forbidden, so she had to maintain her divine composure. She explained to Seiya why he had been summoned, trying her best to speak in the most elegant and ladylike manner possible. Yet somehow, Seiya thought she was just a crazy woman talking nonsense. If Rista was truly a goddess, he argued, she should be perfectly capable of saving the world herself. Regarding this matter, Rista wished she could, but it wasn't allowed. The gods created worlds for humans to live in, and if something happened to those worlds, it had to be humans themselves who saved them. Hearing this, Seiya nodded, beginning to understand. Then he asked about his special skills and privileges. Rista taught him how to open his status window, and when she looked at it, she exclaimed that Seiya's stats were much higher than those of ordinary heroes. That's why Seiya was the only one who could save this world. She would tell him more details later. Rista turned around to open a transfer portal and invited Seiya to follow her. Seiya immediately refused. He wasn't about to enter a dangerous world without weapons or preparations. No way. Rista tried to persuade him, saying his stats were higher than normal and that she would be there to help him. He certainly wouldn't die. Seiya pinned Rista against the wall, pointing out that she was merely a supporting character while he had to do all the work. If he was forced to save this world, he needed time to prepare first. With that, Seiya took off his shirt and began doing push-ups, leaving Rista staring in shock. Now she remembered what was written on Seiya's information sheet. This guy had an extreme caution disorder. Rista went to find the ceiling goddess Area to complain. Area actually found Seiya's behavior reasonable, since the world Rista needed to save was an S-rank mission, and thorough preparation would be better. Area then advised Rista that if Seiya was training and preparing, she should also take care of him, providing basics for living, such as food and a place to rest. Reminded by Area, Rista rushed back with supplies to Seiya's room. Since he was Japanese, she prepared familiar foods for him, starting with rice balls. Rista offered Seiya the food, but he immediately refused, saying he would never eat food given by a stranger. Rista lost her temper and yelled at him, asking what reason she could possibly have to poison him. Seiya still didn't trust her and forced her to eat first to prove it wasn't poisoned. While Seiya ate, Rista conjured a bed, bathroom, and bathing area for him. Then she approached him with a bell, explaining that she would give him time to prepare. She would provide 3 meals a day, leaving them outside his door, and she promised not to disturb him. When he was ready, he should ring the bell, and then they would begin their journey to save the world. At first, Rista thought Seiya would train for at most 3 days, but by the 4th day, there was still no bell sound. Worried that Seiya might have died, she went to check, but seeing the food was gone, she knew he was fine. She had to wait another week, and by then she was thoroughly bored. As she was sprawled on the floor, the bell finally rang. Rista rushed to check on Saya, who showed her his status. Just a glance made Rista's eyes bulge. She couldn't believe that through physical training alone, Saya had leveled up dramatically and even gained special skills. Saya had planned to reach max level before going to save the world, but seeing how pitiful Rista looked, he decided to start the journey now. Rista opened a portal and pulled Saya through. They teleported to a verdant prairie. Rista pointed to a distant town called Adona, explaining they needed to get equipment for Saya first. As the two walked through town, an old man greeted them. Rista cheerfully responded, but Saya remained cautious, analyzing whether the old man might be a shape-shifting monster or criminal to suddenly greet them like that. Just then, a little girl also greeted them. After introducing herself as Nina, she showed Rista the weapons shop. Before entering, Rista gave Saya a bag of money, a gift she had prepared for him. With this much money, Saya could be fully equipped to the teeth. Once inside, after looking around, Saya immediately grabbed 3 sets of armor, startling Rista, who quickly took back the money bag. There was no need for so many sets, she said, and chose armor for Saya herself. After the armor was selected, Saya took back the money bag and rushed to the general store, buying all the smoke bombs and herbs he could. He explained to Rista that since they didn't know what kind of monsters they would face, he had to be thoroughly prepared. Rista was exasperated and shouted at Saya that she was his guide, and she had said this place was safe with no monsters, so he didn't need to be so excessively cautious. Little Nina also chimed in, telling them that only slimes lived here. Seeing that Saya seemed afraid of monsters, Nina gave him a charm. With their equipment fully prepared, it was time to hunt monsters. Rista led Saya out to the prairie, but Saya had no desire to look for trouble. Just then, a slime appeared. Saya immediately hid in a corner to observe and analyze the slime, making Rista sigh. She told him that even children could kill slimes like this. As soon as she finished speaking, Saya drew his sword and slashed at the slime. The devastating blow caused a huge explosion, but Saya didn't stop there. Believing the slime was still alive, he launched countless more attacks. After attacking to his heart's content, Saya finally stopped. Rista then asked if he felt more confident now, and if so, they could move on to the next town. Just then, a powerful force approached, frightening Rista. A voluptuous, horned woman stepped forward and introduced herself as Machina, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon Lord's army, who had come to eliminate the newly arrived hero. Machina knew exactly what Rista had done. Normally, when a hero was summoned, there would be a sign, and Rista would surely choose an easy starting location for the hero to level up. Machina simply had to stand there and wait for them to arrive. Rista broke out in a cold sweat as she checked Machina's stats level 66. This was bad, they needed to flee. But before she could warn Saya, he had already bolted away. Rista, bewildered, could only curse and chase after him. This was the first time she'd seen a hero flee even before the goddess. Rista ran full speed after Saya. Suddenly, he stopped, threw a barrage of smoke bombs, and grabbed Rista, jumping aside narrowly avoiding Machina's attack. The two continued running, with Saya telling Rista they needed to retreat. She understood and created a portal back to the divine realm. Very quickly, Machina caught up right behind Rista. At that moment, Saya threw his backpack in her face, then used his Hellfire skill to burn her. It didn't cause any damage, of course, but it created an opportunity for him to grab Rista and jump through the portal. Despite letting her prey escape, Machina smiled brightly. It didn't matter, as she knew they would meet again soon. As soon as they teleported back to his room, Saya kicked Rista out, reminding her that from now on, he would continue training until he achieved his desired results. He wouldn't leave the room, so Rista should just go back and wait for the bell. 2 days later, Rista was still sitting in her room waiting impatiently. She couldn't just sit idle like this anymore, so she went to find the goddess area to borrow her crystal ball. Rista cast a spell to observe the other world, and immediately Machina's face pressed close to the screen, startling her. Machina knew perfectly well that Rista was watching this world from the divine realm, and had prepared a way to lure her and Saya out. Machina kicked a man on the ground, announcing that from now on, she would kill 1 villager every 10 minutes. If they didn't want her to massacre the entire village, they should get their butts over there quickly. Rista frantically ran to tell Saya, informing him that the village was in danger and asking him to rescue it immediately. Saya, of course, refused, saying he wasn't adequately prepared yet. Rista reprimanded him, saying this wasn't how a hero should act. A true hero would rush to help people in danger. By then, 10 minutes had passed. Machina spoke through the crystal ball, saying the next person she would kill was Nina's father. Rista panicked and tried to persuade Saya to go there immediately, but Saya ignored her and continued doing squats. This angered Rista, who was about to open a portal and go alone when Saya stopped her. As Rista had previously explained, time flowed differently between the divine realm and the other world, so they still had time to save the villagers, no need to rush. Rista understood this, but the next person Machina had chosen was already Nina's father. Were they just going to watch him die? Saya continued exercising while Rista pleaded with all her might. She knew Saya was afraid of dying, but so what? If Saya died, he would return to his original world. But when the villagers died, they were gone forever with no way to bring them back. Saya kept doing squats without saying anything. By now, Rista was truly out of options. Neither harsh nor gentle words worked. She felt she had made a terrible mistake in summoning Saya. He was truly a cowardly hero. Rista started crying and was about to leave when Saya finally spoke. He explained that he had perfectly valid reasons for his actions. If he died now, the town would die too, and eventually the entire world would follow. So he had to prepare thoroughly to be strong enough to win every battle. Rista turned back in surprise to see Saya already wearing his armor. Had he finished his preparations? Rista quickly used her eyes to check, and indeed it was true. She couldn't believe it. In just 2 days, Saya's level had skyrocketed. Now he was strong enough to face Machina. Rista excitedly wanted to open a portal directly to the town to save everyone. But as soon as she suggested this, Saya punched the stupid goddess in the head. If they appeared in the town now, Nina and her father would certainly die before they could save them. So they needed to open the portal a bit farther away. In the town, Machina sat yawning, feeling that 10 minutes was too long. She decided to reduce the execution time to 5 minutes. Just as she raised her blade to strike, Saya appeared. He sent a sword energy wave that Machina dodged, and she laughed loudly, mocking Saya. What kind of hero would sneak attack and miss so badly at that? Saya didn't care much because from the beginning, his target wasn't her but Nina and her father. Once rescued by Saya, they quickly escaped. Machina checked Saya's information and was shocked at how much his stats had increased in such a short time. This wasn't good. She decided to get serious. Machina flexed her muscles, transforming into a hulking figure, then charged at Saya. Saya only blocked her attacks and maintained his distance. Despite her transformation, Saya could still match her speed. This was truly bad. She had to use her final trump card. Sensing something was wrong, Rista shouted for Saya to be careful. Machina laughed maniacally, telling Saya that a true warrior always kept an ace up their sleeve. With that, she stabbed herself with her blade. From her stomach, something strange began to tear through and emerge. Rista turned purple with fear, so this was Machina's true form. Looking at her stats now, they were even more terrifying, even exceeding those of a demon lord in a D-rank world. Having completed her transformation, Machina began taunting Saya. Had he seen what power beyond his comprehension looked like? She declared she would defeat Saya in one blow, then charged at him. Rista burst into tears, apologizing for making Saya face such a powerful opponent. When the dust cleared, somehow Saya had blocked the attack. Rista immediately understood the situation. There was only one possible explanation. Saya's stats were much higher than Machina's. She tried to use her skill to see through Saya's information, which he had hidden. Rista refused to give up, using all her strength to look until her eyes nearly popped out. She was astonished to find that Saya's stats were 10 times higher than what she had seen before. Rista began analyzing what she had witnessed. From the moment Saya arrived in this world, he had concealed his true stats. When he first met Machina, he could have defeated her immediately but chose to return and train more. Just how cautious was this guy? Rista couldn't even imagine. Machina flew into the air, preparing to launch another attack. In the blink of an eye, Saya appeared before her, making Machina break out in a cold sweat. At this point, surrender was no longer an option. Saya drew his blade, channeled fire into his weapon, and sliced Machina to pieces instantly. After Saya landed, Rista ran up to scold him for hiding his true strength from his teammate. Saya looked at Rista with contempt, saying he wanted to tell her, but if Rista could see his stats, so could the enemy. Besides, with Rista's pig brain, she would definitely leak the information, so it was better to be cautious from the beginning. The townspeople gathered around to thank Saya for saving them and invited him to a celebration feast. Saya ignored them, grabbed a broom, and began sweeping, to everyone's confusion. After sweeping up Machina's remains, Saya began burning them with fire not just once, but countless times. Saya burned them until he felt it was enough, burning so thoroughly that the town also turned to ashes, resulting in Rista and Saya being expelled from there. Nina and her father ran after them to thank Saya. The father had nothing but a little spare change to repay him for saving their lives. Saya took it without hesitation and even demanded more from him, embarrassing Rista. who hastily bid farewell to the father and daughter and dragged Saya away. After walking a bit further, Rista wanted to head to the next town, but Saya refused. He believed that after defeating one of the heavenly kings, the demon lord would send even stronger enemies, so he would return to the divine realm to train and prepare more thoroughly. Despite Rista's pleas and persuasion, Saya didn't care. He pointed at Rista's face and declared that she was completely useless and unhelpful, so she should open the portal and go back now. After returning to the divine realm, Rista went to complain to Arya again. That hero only knew how to work out, his head was filled with nothing but fitness. Hearing this, Arya laughed and advised Rista not to rush. After all, Saya couldn't train forever, so she should just be patient and wait. Rista was feeling quite urgent by now. She wanted to quickly complete this mission and be promoted to a great goddess like Arya. At this point, Arya shared her own story with Rista. She was a goddess who had saved 300 worlds, but had failed to save one due to her own mistake. Rista quickly tried to console Arya, saying that out of 300 worlds, failing only one wasn't a big deal. But Arya didn't see it that way. It might not matter to them, but for the people of that world, it mattered a great deal. Arya was about to end her story and go make some tea when Saya suddenly burst in. Seeing Saya, Arya immediately approached to introduce herself and ask about his problem. Saya explained that no matter how many sit-ups or push-ups he did, his level wouldn't increase anymore. Rista's eyes lit up finally. This guy had reached his physical training limit. So she invited Saya to go kill monsters to level up. Saya immediately refused, saying fighting carried too many risks. He wanted another method that was safer and more effective. He'd heard Rista could create anything in the divine realm, so he wanted her to make some training equipment for him. Rista tried to persuade Saya that even if she created these things for him, he would eventually reach a limit, just as he had with physical training. So why not hunt monsters to both level up and gain combat experience? Wouldn't that be better? Seeing the two argue, Arya spoke up. She had an idea for Saya. If he didn't want to fight monsters, she could help him train with the gods in the divine realm. Rista quickly pulled Arya aside, pointing out that training humans was forbidden, and besides, neither of them was a combat deity, so how could they train Saya? Arya smiled and looked out the window, pointing to a very diligent deity in the distance. The god Arya mentioned was Cerseus, the god of swords. Arya approached him on everyone's behalf to ask for his help. Since Arya was a high-ranking goddess, Cerseus couldn't refuse, but he approached Saya with a warning. His training regime was extremely rigorous, and an ordinary person like Saya would struggle to keep up. Saya didn't want to waste time arguing and stepped onto the training field, ready to begin immediately. Both drew their swords, and Cerseus attacked first. Saya observed and blocked every move, impressing the god. After the first day ended, Rista, not wanting to make Saya uncomfortable with her presence, didn't go to the training ground. Instead, she wandered into the dining hall and met Cerseus. She took the opportunity to ask how Saya was doing. Cerseus was very impressed with Saya's performance, saying he was different from other heroes. He learned very quickly, though he still couldn't match the god's skill. On the second day, Rista met Cerseus in the dining hall again, but this time he was completely different. No longer confident like the day before, Cerseus was stuttering and sweating. He told Rista that there was something not right about Saya. He learned too fast. Rista wasn't too surprised and explained that Saya had a skill that boosted his experience points. On the third day, Rista went looking for Cerseus again. This time, he wasn't sitting in the middle of the dining hall, but was huddled in a corner. Sensing something was wrong, Rista approached to ask, but Cerseus said nothing and left. The fourth day arrived. Since she hadn't learned anything the day before, Rista specifically went to find Cerseus's favorite foods, hoping to learn more about Saya's progress. When she opened the door to get the food, somehow she found Cerseus hiding in a corner, looking terrified. Cerseus whispered in Rista's ear that the hero she was managing had gone mad. Even when he told Saya they had trained enough, Saya wouldn't let him go and forced him to continue training. Cerseus hadn't slept for days. "He's not a hero, he's an executioner. A super executioner," Cerseus screamed. Just as he finished speaking, Saya appeared before them, frightening both deities. Saya didn't want to waste more time and called Cerseus to continue training. Today, he wanted to increase the intensity of the training, making Cerseus scream in fear. He threw away his sword, but Saya still wouldn't let him go. Rista tried to stop Saya and reason with him, but at that moment, Arya came to find Rista, reporting that the goddess Ishtar had summoned her. With no other option, Rista had to leave Cerseus behind, hoping he could endure until she returned. Rista went to Ishtar's room and reported everything. When she heard that Cerseus had given up, Ishtar immediately laughed. She told Rista a truth that the sword god Cerseus had once been a human who was elevated to godhood. After becoming a god, he lost all his human memories, but emotions remained forever etched in the soul. When forced by Saya to train to his limits, the weakest emotion in Cerseus's soul must have surfaced. But putting that aside, Ishtar had called Rista there to give her a mission. She wanted the hero and Rista to return to the other world immediately, as the town of Samol was in danger, and that's where the hero's teammates were waiting. After receiving Ishtar's orders, Rista returned to call Saya to come with her. To her shock, she found him repeatedly punching Cerseus in the face. Rista didn't care what excuse Saya had this time. She was determined to drag him along no matter what. Saya didn't refuse. He had extracted everything he could from Cerseus and was in a state of absolute readiness. As soon as they teleported to Samol, Rista saw the townspeople frantically evacuating. After asking around, she learned that an undead army was about to arrive, so people had to leave immediately if they wanted to stay alive. As they walked, Rista explained to Saya what undead were. As soon as he learned they were afraid of holy water, Saya rushed into a store, wanting to order 1,000 bottles of holy water just to be safe, but the seller couldn't provide that many, greatly frustrating Saya. Once again, Rista had to mediate. Their next destination was the church, where Saya's teammates would be waiting. They arrived quickly, and the sister and priest recognized the goddess immediately and came to welcome them. They introduced Alulu and Mash, who had dragon blood and would be Saya's teammates on the next leg of the journey. The priest also greeted and introduced himself to Saya. Saya said nothing but approached and poured holy water on the priest's head, startling Rista, who yelled, asking what the hell Saya was doing. Immediately, the priest's head began to smoke. It turned out he was already an undead, which greatly impressed Alulu and Mash. They rushed forward, wanting to fight him. Rista also reminded Saya to help them, but Saya had already done so as she finished speaking. The priest's body began to disintegrate. Saya now approached to examine him. No bleeding, unable to move, yet still alive, so this was an undead. At this point, the priest laughed threateningly. He was a servant of Defmegla, one of the 4 heavenly kings. By dawn tomorrow, an army of 10,000 undead would sweep through this town, and when that happened, not even a hero could stand against them. That was all the information Saya wanted from him. Since he was undead and still not dead in this state, Saya decided to be more cautious than usual. Rista jumped in alarm and quickly grabbed everyone, rushing out of the church as it exploded with each skill Saya fired. After it was over, the church had become ruins, and the sister fainted at the sight. Though somewhat crazy, Mash was impressed by Saya's power. The two approached to shake hands with Saya, hoping they could explore together from now on. Saya pulled out holy water from his pocket and poured it on Mash and Alulu's heads. Seeing no reaction, Saya finally introduced himself. By now, Alulu and Mash were starting to be wary of Saya. His level of craziness was beyond normal. They turned to find Rista and Saya staring at them intently, checking their information. However, Mash and Alulu's stats weren't very high. Rista thought they could still level up, so there was no need to rush, but Saya disagreed. He flatly refused to team up with 2 such weak individuals. Saya clearly stated his position. Mash and Alulu were too weak, and they would only be a burden if they followed him, so he absolutely did not need them to accompany him. These words angered Mash, who wanted to attack Saya, but a team of guards appeared and stopped them. Seeing that the church had been destroyed, the guards were upset and asked everyone what had happened. Rista was sweating profusely, not knowing how to explain. By now, the sister had regained consciousness but couldn't remember clearly and only vaguely explained, then informed the guards that 10,000 undead troops would arrive in the city by morning. But fortunately, God had heard their prayers and sent down the goddess and knight standing over there. Surely they would keep this town safe. When introduced by the sister, the guards knelt in respect to Rista and Saya, begging Saya to help protect the town. Saya didn't care about their pleas, he only wanted to know how much money they would pay him for this. Money? The captain asked, bewildered. If Saya could truly drive away the undead army, the Empire would pay him a lot of money, estimated at about 1,000 gold coins. Upon hearing this, Saya immediately pulled out a form and made the knight sign it. The knight took the form and informed Saya that about 200 more knights would arrive to fight alongside him. Saya immediately refused. He didn't need knights or whatever to follow him. What they needed to do was stay and protect the townspeople. After saying this, Saya turned to Mash and advised that if he didn't want to go home, he could join the guards, but he absolutely could not follow Saya. Mash angrily shouted and left, which made Rista somewhat worried that they might rush into the undead army. Saya wasn't concerned at all, believing they weren't that stupid. and even if they were, he would finish off all the undead before they could rush in. With that, Saya activated his flying skill and rose into the air. He knew full well that Rista couldn't fly, so he told her to return to the inn and wait. He would handle the undead army alone. This statement touched Rista's pride. As a goddess, how could she not know how to fly? It was just that her powers were temporarily sealed. Rista looked up to the sky and shouted, unlocking her seal and manifesting a pair of wings to chase after Saya. Saya had just been getting used to his new skill, but now he would fly at full speed. Rista strained with all her might to chase him, but still couldn't catch up. At least her effort made Saya reconsider. He circled back, grabbed Rista's hand, and dragged her along with all his strength. Rista could only endure and scream in desperation. After a while, they finally arrived. Rista angrily scolded Saya, saying that because of him, the feathers on her divine wings were almost completely plucked. Saya didn't care and told Rista to keep quiet. They were now standing above the undead army. Seeing them marching in formation like this, Saya had an idea to eliminate them quickly. He would use an atomic bomb to deal with them. Rista was somewhat curious, thinking this was a power from Saya's original world that he couldn't use here. Of course, Saya already had a substitute. He cast a spell to create a small meteor right above them. The falling speed and heat of this small meteor could instantly incinerate them all. Rista stared in shock, since when had this guy become so powerful? She hated to admit it, but truly, Saya alone was enough. They didn't need Mash, Alulu, or anyone else. An idea immediately formed in Rista's mind. If Saya were to throw such an attack at the Demon Lord's castle now, wouldn't they have already conquered this world? Saya was preparing to cast a second spell when he suddenly stopped, complaining that he had used too much mana. So Rista had to help Saya return to town. Alulu came to Rista to inform her that Mash had completely disappeared 2 days ago. Hearing this, Rista comforted Alulu, saying there was no need to worry. Currently, the undead army had been completely eliminated, so the chances of Mash running into trouble were minimal. Moreover, they had the hero Saya here, though at the moment he was absorbed in researching some kind of combination skill. After chatting with Alulu, Rista went to Saya's room. To her surprise, Saya had managed to create a platinum sword, using Rista's hair to enhance its power. Rista was about to scold Saya when the landlady entered the room, carrying a package she had been asked to deliver to Saya. Rista eagerly opened it to check. Inside was an exquisitely crafted mirror. Rista immediately struck some seductive poses, admiring herself in the mirror, when suddenly the image in the mirror changed. Alulu immediately recognized it was Mash. A growling voice began to speak. It was Deathmagla, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon Lord. Last time, he had been lucky to survive when controlling the undead army from afar. That army had taken him so much effort to create, yet Saya had ruthlessly destroyed it. Because of this, he had decided to take revenge on them. Mash was tightly bound to a torture chair, but Deathmagla had grown bored with him. Deathmagla decided to kill Mash in front of them. He held a knife to Mash's throat, giving him a few last words. Mash smiled without fear or anger, only admiring Saya's strength. Though somewhat of a jerk, Saya was truly the one who could save this world, and Mash hoped Saya would carry on for him in the journey ahead. Only now did Saya step up to the mirror. He told Rista to open a portal back to the Divine Realm, then looked at Mash and decided to let him join as his equipment carrier. Hearing this, Deathmagla laughed loudly. What were they trying to do? They were only talking through a mirror. Saya could never save Mash. Saya didn't care and drew his sword, instantly cutting off Deathmagla's hand. To Rista's surprise, since the incident with Nina's father being held hostage, Saya had prepared for similar situations. Now he could cut through space itself. After cutting, Saya immediately pushed Rista into the portal back to the Divine Realm. In at most 10 seconds, Deathmagla would kill Mash. Time flowed differently between the Divine Realm and the other world, so they would have 15 minutes to save Mash from him. Saya went to find the goddess Ishtar, asking her to locate Mash's position. Although helping humans too much would break the rules, Saya had already thought of a way to bend the rules for her. So Ishtar happily complied. After learning the exact location of Deathmagla, Saya asked Rista to open a portal directly in front of him, then assigned her a task. As soon as the portal opened, Saya rushed through, shooting fire into Deathmagla's face and pushing him back. Meanwhile, Rista ran to use healing magic on Mash. As she worked, she kept an eye on Saya's situation. At this point, Deathmagla had summoned a pitch-black creature. This was the Dark Furus, the strongest fire-type monster. Rista's face turned pale as she quickly checked its information. This monster had 100,000 defense points and was resistant to most attributes. Only ice could damage it. Hearing this, Deathmagla laughed loudly. He had monitored Saya's entire battle with Machina. After learning that Saya used fire magic, he had prepared this monster to fight him. Now, how would Saya defeat him? Saya smiled and sheathed his sword, telling him that he was always in a state of absolute readiness. Then Saya rushed forward and punched the monster in the stomach. Frustrated, Dethmagla pumped all his power into the flame, wanting to incinerate Saya in one more blow. Saya didn't dodge but fought hand to hand. With just an ordinary person's punch, Dethmagla couldn't believe Saya could block it. Their fists collided. Immediately, the monster's hand began to freeze, stunning Dethmagla. How could Saya use ice power? Fire and ice were clearly opposites. Only now did he notice a ring on Saya's hand. Rista had also figured it out. Saya had combined them. From his pocket, Saya pulled out several more rings, prepared for all situations. Not just ice, he had also crafted darkness, light, thunder, earth, and leaf, every type imaginable. Dethmagla still didn't believe it. Even if Saya could use ice magic, with 100,000 defense points, his monster could still withstand it. But this too was within Saya's calculations. The opposite of ice was fire, and currently, the monster was being frozen. Saya only needed to deliver one more powerful fire attack, and victory would certainly be his. Saya drew his sword and lunged forward, stabbing the monster in the chest. Its body began to disintegrate, terrifying Dethmagla. At this point, he had no more cards to play. Saya approached him, and Rista immediately understood his intention, helping Mash leave at once. The enormous castle was now filled only with the desperate screams of the heavenly king Dethmagla. Mash was brought back to the inn to rest, with Alulu standing sadly by his side. After a while, Mash woke up, looking confusedly at Rista and Alulu. Rista immediately explained to him that Saya had defeated Dethmagla, and she had brought Mash out of the castle when he had fainted. Just then, Saya arrived carrying a bag, which he placed on the table. He told Mash and Alulu to quickly get ready. From now on, he would allow these two kids to carry his equipment. Alulu was delighted, as carrying equipment for the hero was an honor, but Mash gripped the bedsheet tightly. After what had happened, Mash had realized many things, the most important being that his power level was insufficient. So he immediately knelt down and begged Saya to teach him. Saya neither agreed nor refused. As long as Mash carried his equipment, he could do whatever he wanted. Saya was about to set off immediately when Mash stopped him. To show their gratitude, he and Alulu wanted to take Saya to the dragon's cave first. 16 years ago, a legend had been passed around in the village where Mash was born. A dragon had descended from heaven, bringing Mash and Alulu with it. The villagers had told Mash that there was a seal there, and if the prophesied hero came there with Mash and Alulu, they could break the seal, and Saya would receive a legendary weapon capable of defeating any enemy. Hearing about a legendary weapon, Rista's eyes lit up. She rushed over to beg Saya to go there with the children. Saya refused immediately, saying he had somewhere else to go first. Rista opened a portal to bring Saya back to the Divine Realm, and this time Mash and Alulu accompanied them. It was their first time in the Divine Realm, and they were extremely excited, asking Saya for permission to look around a bit. But Saya grabbed them, saying there was no time for that. The group went to the dining hall together. Rista looked left and right but couldn't see Cerseus anywhere. It turned out he was wearing an apron and baking. As soon as he saw Rista, he immediately tried to hide. But how could he escape Saya's notice? When Rista asked what he was doing there, Cerseus made the excuse that he had put down his sword and switched to baking. Saya didn't care about his hobbies. He pointed his sword at Cerseus's face, wanting him to return to his main duty. Cerseus screamed in fear and refused, saying he wouldn't train anyone anymore. But when Rista pushed Mash forward, Cerseus's attitude changed immediately. Mash's stats were too weak, much weaker than Cerseus's, so he laughed loudly and agreed to teach Mash. Alulu would receive a different training course. Rista took her to meet the fire goddess Hestiaka. Helping humans save the world was the responsibility of the gods, so Hestiaka couldn't refuse Rista. After arranging for the two children, Saya and Rista left. Next, Saya wanted to find someone to train him. Hearing this, Rista silently cursed Saya after what he had done. Who would want to teach him? While lost in thought, Rista bumped into a massive chest. It was Valkyrie, the goddess of destruction. She immediately grabbed Rista by the collar and threatened her. How dare a third-rank goddess block her way? Rista fearfully apologized to Valkyrie, after which Valkyrie began to tease her a bit. Once she was done teasing, she was ready to leave. Although Saya didn't want to admit it, he had to tell Rista that he sensed a terrifying power emanating from Valkyrie. This was certainly true because, from what Rista knew, she was the strongest goddess in the Divine Realm. Rista also advised Seiya not to even think about asking her to teach him, as Valkyrie would kill any ordinary person who dared to speak to her. Before Rista could finish her sentence, Seiya had already rushed over to ask Valkyrie to teach him. Seiya's impudent attitude made Valkyrie extremely angry. Rista tried to beg Valkyrie for forgiveness, but Valkyrie didn't care. It was too late for apologies, and she would kill Seiya right there. Just as she was about to act, the goddess Arya appeared and apologized to Valkyrie on Seiya's behalf. Since Arya was also a high-ranking goddess, Valkyrie didn't want to make things difficult, but in return, she wanted Arya to let her grope her chest freely. Arya reluctantly agreed. After Valkyrie left, Arya turned to scold Seiya. Learning that he wanted someone to train with, Arya called Seiya to come with her. She took Seiya to meet Adenella, the goddess of war, and asked her to train Seiya. Train a human? Adenella laughed out loud. That would be fun. In a flash, Adenella appeared behind Seiya, telling him she only had one move. This move was too fast, much faster than the speed that ordinary human eyes could see. Could Seiya learn it? Seiya accepted the challenge without a second thought. The first day of learning began. As usual, Rista brought food for everyone. Mash was fine, Alulu was doing well with the goddess Hestiaka, and finally, Rista went to Seiya's training place, where she found Adenella sitting against a wall. When asked, Adenella's face turned red as she explained, while laughing, that she had to admit this hero was a bit strange, but teaching him was quite fun. On the second day of training, when Rista brought food, she found Mash and Seiya already sitting in the canteen. Mash had called Seiya out, wanting to learn more from him. Seiya, having finished his business, stood up to leave, while Rista sat down to ask Mash what exactly Seiya had taught him. Of course, it was all theories about being excessively cautious. The third and final day of training arrived. After the session, Rista came to pick up Mash, preparing to return to the other world. After training with Cerseus, Mash's level had increased significantly, but Alulu hadn't improved at all. At that point, Hestiaka called Rista aside for a private conversation, informing her that Alulu had no talent for magic, so it would be better for her to give up early. After picking up the two children, Rista went back to find Seiya. Seiya was still waiting to see what Adenella wanted to give him. From a distance, Adenella approached wearing a dress, smiling with eyes crinkled, running towards Seiya. Her appearance was completely different from 3 days ago, making Rista's jaw drop. Just how charming was this guy? Adenella gave Seiya a cake made with all her heart. Seiya bluntly refused and left, making Adenella angry. She began to wreck the divine realm. Rista screamed for Seiya to fix the problem he had created, but Seiya didn't care and walked into the teleportation gate. Their next destination was the dragon's cave. As they walked, Alulu practiced fire magic. If monsters appeared, she wanted to help Seiya. Seiya immediately refused, saying Alulu's job was to carry equipment, and she shouldn't worry about anything else. Just then, an orc appeared. Mash drew his sword, ready to fight it, when a firebird swooped down from the sky and incinerated the orc. This was Seiya's new skill, summoning a firebird with a range of up to 50 meters. Any monster within this range would be targeted. Several more waves of monsters appeared, all of which were eliminated by the firebird. The group reached a nearby town to buy more equipment. To enter the cave, they needed torches. This was when Seiya tested Mash, asking him how many they should buy. Mash confidently answered 50. Wrong, it's 500, Rista quickly jumped in. 5 is enough, you guys. After buying the torches, the group continued on their way. At this point, Alulu and Mash's hands suddenly began to glow, a sign that they were very close to the dragon's cave. Soon, the group found the entrance. Seiya led everyone inside. Before them appeared a large door with 2 handprints on it. Mash and Alulu immediately understood. They were about to run over to break the seal when Seiya suddenly drew his sword. There was no need for such complications with his ultra-fast slashes. Seiya broke through the door and jumped inside. Inside was nothing but a pedestal. After the group entered, it immediately lit up, inviting them to step onto the glowing pedestal to be teleported to the dragon village. Rista wanted to jump right in, but Seiya stopped her. He placed a stone dummy on it to check first. After confirming there were no traps, Seiya let everyone teleport together. Upon arrival, they were greeted by a dragon human, who introduced himself as Lagos and welcomed them to the dragon village. Lagos also served as a guide for the group, explaining the village's history as they walked. Lagos led them to the dragon mother Lavi, who called Mash over and taught him how to transform into a dragon human. This way, Mash could increase his strength tenfold. Alulu was also excited and wanted Lavi to teach her, but the dragon mother refused, saying Alulu had a more important mission. By sacrificing her life, Alulu would become the ultimate weapon for the hero to defeat the demon lord. Seeing everyone still confused, Lavi explained further. Legend had it that when a dragon was born in human form and sacrificed their life, the ultimate sword would appear. Hearing this, Mash immediately refused. He didn't want his friend Alulu to die. Lavi didn't care and reminded both of them that currently, 70% of the world was under the Demon Lord's army. They went wherever they pleased, massacring the people there, with mostly small villages remaining. If the situation continued like this, soon the world would be completely controlled by demons. The only way to save the world was to defeat the Demon Lord. Lavi turned to admire Alulu, saying she greatly respected her. Alulu was the ultimate sword, the sword that would slay the Demon Lord in the future. Hearing Lavi speak, the other dragon humans bowed, showing respect to Alulu. Lavi had made her decision. Now that the hero was here, they would perform the sword offering ceremony that night. So Alulu should spend her last moments with her friends. As they left the palace, Mash turned to ask Alulu if she really wanted to sacrifice herself to save the world. Alulu looked sad but still tried to answer Mash, saying that for a long time, she had hoped to be useful. Now that opportunity had come, she would become the sword to save this world. Rista turned to find Saya, but he had already been browsing a nearby stall for some time. She angrily asked how he could still be shopping at a time like this. He should at least think about Alulu. Saya replied that if that was what Alulu needed to do, then he had nothing more to say to her. Alulu's eyes welled up with tears as she heard these words, and she turned and left immediately. That evening, a feast was held at Lavi's castle. Saya's group was treated like VIP guests, with 2 little dragon girls bringing cookies to Rista. She had to coax Saya for a long time before he would eat one to please them. Just as he put it in his mouth, the lights in the room suddenly went out. The crucial moment had arrived. Alulu, in a magnificent outfit, was led by the dragon guards to a cliff. According to Lavi's knowledge, this was the Dragon Abyss, established by the first Dragon Emperor. By jumping down, Alulu's blood and flesh would transform into the ultimate sword. Standing on the cliff, Alulu turned to look at Mash and smiled. Soon she would see them again. She hoped that when she became a sword, at least Saya would clean her regularly so she wouldn't rust. Hearing these words, Mash's heart twisted in pain. He couldn't bear it anymore and wanted to save Alulu, but he was stopped by 2 dragon guards. On the cliff, Alulu was beginning to show signs of fear. Seeing this, Lavi ordered the dragon guards to help Alulu complete the ritual. Despite Rista's advice, all the dragon people were shouting the name of the holy sword, not caring about Alulu's feelings at all. Alulu had reached the edge of the cliff and couldn't turn back as the 2 dragon guards kept advancing. Just then, Saya appeared behind them, kicking both guards back to Lavi. Saya sighed and told Alulu that he had clearly said he had nothing more to say earlier that afternoon. But how could Alulu be so stupid as to not understand his meaning? If Alulu became a sword, how could she carry his equipment? Hearing these words, Rista immediately laughed. Lavi was confused, and Rista turned to declare to her that they were heroes sent to save this world one way or another. They would never let their comrade lose her life. Despite all this, Lavi still wouldn't listen. She bowed her head and lamented that heroes and goddesses ultimately only thought of themselves, not of her tribe. These words truly angered Mash. He transformed into a dragon human and pushed aside the 2 guards, wanting to knock some sense into Lavi, when he suddenly collapsed. Rista fell too. Lavi laughed loudly, telling them she was careful and had anticipated this would happen. So she had laced their drinks with paralysis poison. She wanted to continue with the ritual, but somehow Saya was unaffected. Saya smiled and called it a childish trick. He would never eat food from lizards. Since this approach didn't work, there was only one option left. Lavi transformed into a giant dragon and flew in front of Saya. Rista broke into a sweat when she looked at Lavi's stats: abnormally high health and absolute defense. Saya remained very calm and turned to ask Mash which compartment the weapons were in. From his bag, Saya pulled out a pitch-black sword. Just seeing it made Lavi tremble in fear, as it was the dragon-slaying sword. Both Mash and Rista were amazed. How on earth did Saya have that sword? Of course, it was thanks to his meticulous preparation. From the moment he knew they were going to the dragon's cave, Saya had considered the variable of having to fight a dragon, so he had prepared this sword in advance. As for where it came from, Saya had used the hair of Mash, Alulu, and Rista to create it. Saya rushed up to attack Lavi. With the true dragon-slaying sword, Saya was able to damage her. Lavi laughed loudly, reminding Saya once more that, as she had said, she was a cautious person. As she finished speaking, Alulu's collar suddenly lit up, and the girl collapsed in pain. It was a prison collar when the curse was activated. Alulu had only 3 minutes to save her life. After she died, they just needed to throw her into the abyss to complete the ritual. Saya turned to check on Alulu, and then advised Lavi that if she wasn't allied with the Demon Lord, this was her last chance to lift the curse from Alulu. Of course, she wouldn't listen. So Saya had no reason to hold back anymore. He shot a stream of fire that, with just one move, took away more than half of Lavi's health. Yet she still didn't back down. Although the hero was very strong, she was confident that it would take more than 3 minutes to defeat her. Then she began to shrink herself and enter a defensive state. Seeing this, Saya immediately responded by taking out a bag and pouring its contents into his mouth and chewing. These were speed seeds. With them, Saya's speed would increase dramatically. That wasn't all. Saya pulled out another dragon-slaying sword. Combining these, he would kill Lavi before Alulu's death sentence arrived. Preparations complete, Saya rushed to attack her continuously. Rista kept updating the situation, but it wasn't good. Lavi's defense was too high. Despite Saya's constant slashing, she barely lost any health. With only 1 minute left, Lavi laughed and advised Saya to stop this meaningless battle. Saya continued to attack and sneered contemptuously at her. "And you call yourself cautious?" This statement made her realize that she was being gradually pushed to the edge of the abyss. Rista managed to stand up and advised Lavi to lift the curse from Alulu, and then everything would stop right there. Lavi closed her eyes tightly and shouted that she had already lifted it. As soon as Saya stopped attacking, she shot fire at him. Saya immediately responded with a sword stroke, pushing her away from the abyss. At least she still had wings to save herself, so she remained confident. But no matter how much she flapped her wings, she couldn't fly up. Lavi broke into a sweat and turned to check. To her horror, her wings had already been shattered. She plunged straight down into the abyss. Only then did Saya carry Alulu back to Rista. At this point, Rista curiously asked Saya when he had destroyed Lavi's wings. Of course, it was before she hardened herself. Saya had prepared for every possible scenario. At this moment, a beam of light emerged from the dragon abyss. From below, the holy sword flew up, to everyone's amazement. Although they had obtained the holy sword, Lagos still felt uneasy because their leader, Lavi, was dead. Hearing this, Saya immediately patted him on the shoulder and manipulated his mind. At least they had the sword to destroy the Demon Lord, so Lavi's sacrifice was entirely justified. Now it was time to dissolve the Congress. The group teleported back to the dragon's cave. At this point, Rista called Mash and Alulu to wait for her at the cave entrance, as she had some private matters to discuss with Saya. After the two children left, Rista shouted in Saya's face, blaming him for daring to pull out her hair without permission. Saya didn't care and was about to leave when Rista stopped him again. Regarding the holy sword Saya had just obtained, it wasn't actually a holy sword. If Rista already knew, then Saya had nothing to hide. Just now, he had only deceived the dragon tribe. The sword he was holding was one he had prepared in advance. Rista was still not convinced to kill the Demon Lord. The holy sword was the only weapon capable of doing so. Saya didn't think so. If not this way, there would be another way. Everything would be fine. With that, Saya called Alulu to leave the cave with him. Just as they reached the entrance, they found Alulu and Mash in a state of fear. In front of the cave was a group of guards, seemingly there to eliminate Rista and Saya on someone's orders. The captain of the soldiers stepped forward to greet everyone, then informed them that the night squad led by Rosalia was currently fighting monsters at Fort Ogla. He hoped the hero and goddess would go to rescue them. Rista sighed upon hearing this. At least let them rest a bit first. But the captain wanted them to depart immediately, fearing they wouldn't arrive in time to help. He personally would take Saya and Rista there. "That's not necessary," said Saya as he flew into the air. "A normal person who can fly. Indeed, he is the hero," the soldiers exclaimed in admiration. With the hero's power, he would surely defeat Beelzebub. When Rista inquired about this name, the captain explained further. It was a monster in the shape of a fly, leading other flies in attacking Fort Ogla. That information was enough. Saya called Mash to accompany him, while Alulu would go with Rista. The group flew together toward Fort Ogla. While flying, they suddenly noticed a dark cloud. Rista's eyes bulged as she realized with a start that it was Beelzebub's fly army. The group hid in a corner to observe. These flies were all above level 30, much tougher than the undead, Saya assessed. Just then, Beelzebub's voice rang out. At the edge of the forest, soldiers were desperately fighting against the fly army. Rista checked Beelzebub's stats. He wasn't one of the 4 heavenly kings, but his speed was abnormally fast. His fly army was extremely powerful and brutal. On Beelzebub's command, they snatched soldiers up high, then dropped them to shatter their bones and flesh. Watching this scene, Beelzebub laughed loudly, declaring he would slaughter everything until the hero appeared. Now Saya understood why Fort Ogla hadn't fallen, yet this guy was trying to lure him out. After Beelzebub left, Saya approached the soldiers. Rosalia, barely able to see, immediately recognized Hero Saya. She urged her soldiers to prepare a counterattack, but was stopped by Carlo. There were still too many wounded, so he asked Rosalia not to be hasty. Seeing his point, Rosalia invited Saya's group to Fort Ogla to discuss strategy. As they walked, Carlo explained the situation to Saya. Everything Beelzebub did was to lure Saya out. Even if he destroyed the fort, he couldn't advance deeper into the Empire because if he went any further, the Empire's greatest general would eliminate him immediately. Saya found this perplexing. If this general was so powerful, why wasn't he saving the world? There had to be a reason, though it wasn't clear what. The great general was bound and couldn't leave the capital. Carlo brought everyone to the meeting room. Before the meeting began, Saya needed to ensure his safety first. Then came a series of possibilities that Saya predicted: disguised monsters, a booby-trapped castle, eavesdroppers. After checking everything and finding no problems, Rosalia angrily told him to stop this nonsense. There was no need for a meeting anymore. She and the hero would attack the demons directly. Saya agreed, but only with the first part. No more meetings. Saya decided to leave this place and return to the divine realm to train more, including training the whole group. Rosalia's mouth fell open. Was Saya abandoning them? At this point, Rista spoke up to defend Saya, explaining that time in the divine realm was different from here, so they didn't need to worry. Hearing this, Rosalia shifted her attention to Rista. If Saya needed more training, then the goddess could fight alongside her instead. Saya immediately dismissed this idea, telling Rosalia that Rista might carry the title of goddess, but she was useless and couldn't do anything. The only option was for them to wait here while he returned to train more. He had already observed the fly swarm and currently saw no chance of victory. Having observed this, Rosalia froze, then shouted at Saya, calling him the type of cold-blooded hero who stood by watching her comrades die. Saya remained very calm as he retorted, "If you already know there's no chance, then rushing in is an extremely stupid action. In such cases, you must calmly calculate the next steps." Rosalia pointed at him, accusing him of being a coward. Hearing this, Rista also spoke up to defend him, saying he was just excessively cautious, but it was precisely this cautious nature that had helped them win several battles already. Rista hoped Rosalia would stay and wait a bit until Saya returned. Hearing this, Rosalia turned to scold Rista. What would an immortal deity know about life and death? 100 of her soldiers had died. How could Rista understand? Suddenly, Saya spoke up in rebuttal. The one who killed them was Rosalia herself. Because she had no strategy, she led them to their deaths. Rosalia, furious, rushed forward to slap Saya, but he deflected her hand and slapped her back, to everyone's astonishment. Rosalia still wouldn't give up, trying to attack several more times until both her cheeks were swollen from Saya's slaps. Rosalia was enraged and burst into tears, but Saya didn't care and asked Rista to open a portal back to the divine realm. As soon as they returned, Rista reproached Saya, saying his behavior wasn't right at all after all. Rosalia was still a woman. Saya clenched his fist and replied that even if she was a woman, he could never forgive her stupid way of thinking. Next came the plan to defeat the fly swarm. In his original world, Saya would just need a gun, but since there were no guns here, he had to substitute with a bow and arrow. After that, he was led by Rista to meet the bow goddess Midas. Saya didn't let Rista introduce or greet her, but went straight to the point. He wanted to know how many arrows Midas could shoot at once. Hearing this, Midas put down her wooden bow and conjured a magic bow. As she demonstrated, she answered Saya. At maximum, she could shoot 7 arrows simultaneously with perfect accuracy. If Saya wanted to learn, he first had to know how to create a magic bow. Hearing this, Saya turned to ask Alulu to teach him how to create a fire bow. Whatever Alulu showed him, Saya could do without any difficulty. Saya stayed to learn from Midas, while Mash and Alulu were led away by Rista. Mash also wanted to find someone to train him, but Alulu didn't at this point. The little girl just wanted to sit and eat candy. Just then, Circeus walked by. Seeing Rista, he immediately approached to gently remind her about Adanella. Only with his reminder did Rista remember that Saya had previously broken a girl's heart. Circeus also felt that Adanella's situation wasn't good. All day she kept muttering about killing Saya, and likely she was still obsessing over it. Rista worriedly went to find Arya for help. After hearing the story, Arya smiled and reassured Rista not to worry, someone as cautious as Seiya would never be ambushed. Then Arya turned to look at Mash, knowing that there was a seal within his body. Since seals were her specialty, Arya decided to help Mash remove it. Not only Mash, but Alulu also had hidden skills, so Rista left the two children with Arya, while she went alone to Adanella's house. As soon as she entered, the scene before her frightened Rista, the walls were covered with the word, "Kill," written in blood. Adanella suddenly appeared behind Rista, asking if Seiya had returned with her. Rista broke into a sweat as she replied, making the excuse that this time she had come back on her own without bringing Seiya along. After leaving Adanella's house, Rista ran straight to warn Seiya. If he had trained enough, they should flee quickly. But it was too late. Adanella was already standing right behind Rista. She knew very well that Rista wouldn't return alone, so she had deliberately followed her. Now it was time to settle things with Seiya. The killing intent emanating from the war goddess made Rista breathe heavily, but Seiya remained indifferent as he approached Adanella, patting her head and telling her that her hair was a bit messy. This action of Seiya's was so cool that Adanella, despite her best efforts, ultimately forgave him, only to be sent away by Seiya so he could continue his bow training. Rista returned to have tea with Arya. As Arya had advised Rista from the beginning, there was no need to worry. Adanella was a good goddess, so she wouldn't bother to kill a human. Whatever those two wanted to do, let them be. Arya invited Rista to check on Mash and Alulu. Arya opened the door and asked Mash to show what he could do now. Mash excitedly stood up and transformed his arm to become much larger. This was the dragon arm, the hidden power within Mash's body. Arya had used her abilities to unlock it for Mash. From now on, with this arm, Mash could fight with very high damage output. Arya still found it a bit creepy. Suddenly having such a large arm didn't seem right at all. Alulu immediately chimed in, agreeing completely. Mash's body was tiny, but with his arm so swollen, he looked like some kind of deformed person. Hearing these words from his close friend made Mash angry, and he turned to scold Alulu. Somehow, from his speech to his movements, Mash suddenly became slow. This was the delay spell, a hidden support magic of Alulu's that Arya had helped her unlock. And that wasn't all. Alulu dispelled the slowing effect on Mash, then pumped him with a speed spell. This time, Mash couldn't stand still, his mouth continuously talking, making everyone laugh. After this event, Rista praised Alulu wholeheartedly. If she had known Arya would guide them so well, she would have left the two children with Arya to teach from the beginning. Hearing this, Arya immediately declined the credit, saying she hadn't done much, she had simply helped the two children use their inherent potential. The two kids were fine now. Rista only hoped that things with Seiya were going as smoothly. As soon as she heard that Seiya was training with Midas, Arya slammed the table and stood up abruptly, informing Rista that the goddess was a sex addict. Over the years, Midas had kidnapped countless heroes, which was why Ishtar had banished her to that forest. If such a thing were to happen, Seiya would no longer be able to be a hero, because a goddess having relations with an ordinary person was a taboo that couldn't be circumvented. After hearing Arya's warning, Rista's face turned pale as she rushed to find Seiya. When she arrived, she found Seiya standing alone, with Midas in front of him naked and hanging herself from a tree. When she asked Seiya, she learned that earlier, Midas had asked him to wait here while she went to prepare. When he returned, he found her like this. Midas excitedly laughed out loud, saying this would be Seiya's final test. He needed to use the magic bow to shoot precisely at the rope. Then she would fall down in her naked state, and they would have passionate sex. Rista screamed, not allowing this to happen. But Midas didn't care about Rista anymore. From the moment she saw such a handsome hero as Seiya, Midas had determined that she must have sex with him no matter what. Rista turned to stop Seiya, but saw he had already drawn his bow. Seiya shot directly at Midas's head, startling Rista. Although she knew deities couldn't die, Seiya's action was still too disrespectful to the divine. Midas broke the rope herself and landed on the ground. She said that Seiya's joke wasn't funny at all. As mentioned before, this was Seiya's final test. He had missed, so they would switch to another test. Midas warned Seiya to prepare as she would attack now. With that, Midas rushed towards Seiya. Seiya remained very calm as he drew his bow, shooting 2 arrows into her eyes and the final one into her mouth. Despite taking 3 precise arrows from Seiya, Midas could still stand up. Her expression frightened Mash and Alulu. She didn't look like a goddess at all. At this point, Midas noticed Mash. A little Shota. "Well, I'll eat Mash first as an appetizer," she said as she rushed toward him. Mash, terrified, ran for his life. By now, Seiya was ready to shoot, aiming directly at Midas. From the beginning, he knew Midas would target Mash. 5 arrows were shot by Saya, pinning her to a tree branch. "Wonderful," Midas exclaimed. A human able to shoot 5 divine arrows at once was incredibly terrifying. She had nothing left to teach Saya. With these words from Midas, Saya entered his state of absolute readiness. The group teleported back to the other world. As soon as they appeared, Carlo was already standing behind them. He informed Rista that Rosalia had gone alone to Beelzebub's lair. This was completely within Saya's predictions. He carried Mash and flew into the air. From here to the monster's lair was very far. Rosalia couldn't possibly get there before him. With that, the group rushed off together. Saya chose a perfect high position to observe them. By now, Rosalia was already climbing up to their lair. Thanks to a divine shield, the flies couldn't attack her. This was a perfect bait. Saya drew his bow, aiming at Beelzebub. He would shoot him from this distance, and Saya was certain it would hit. Just as he was about to shoot, a squad of soldiers appeared, greeting the hero. These guys were too noisy, making Rista worry that the flies would discover them. It still didn't matter. This was within Saya's calculations. On Rosalia's side, whether brave or foolish, she shouted loudly, demanding a one-on-one fight with Beelzebub, only to be snatched up into the air by him. Because the soldiers made too much noise, the flies had begun to fly over to investigate. So Saya poked his sword into Rista, demanding she go out to distract them. Although not understanding what Saya wanted her to do, Rista followed his orders and flew in front of Beelzebub, demanding he release Rosalia immediately. Why would he agree? From the beginning, Rosalia was just bait to lure Saya out. But he wouldn't hand her over. Instead, he announced he would drop Rosalia from the sky. Rosalia, on the verge of death, still defiantly cursed at him, then turned to ask Rista if the hero had finished his training yet. Training? Beelzebub immediately understood that Saya would attack him with a bow and arrow. So he pulled Rosalia and flew very high, beyond the range of arrows. Seeing Rista still flying after him, he planned to throw Rosalia so hard that she couldn't catch her. Just then, an arrow flew past his face. Rosalia had escaped, and Rista successfully caught her. Beelzebub couldn't believe that Saya could shoot arrows this high. He had studied magic bows thoroughly. This was illogical. Surely Saya must have flown up to be able to shoot. Then he shouted loudly, declaring himself the fastest in the Demon Lord's army. He told Saya to shoot freely and promised not to run away. From a distance, 7 beams of light flashed, startling Rista. Wasn't that the ultimate skill of the goddess Midas? So Saya had learned it. But would he hit? 7 arrows flew straight toward Beelzebub. Somehow, he could still dodge them, making Rista sweat profusely. This wasn't good. This guy was invincible in aerial combat. What to do now? When Saya shot those 7 arrows, he also revealed his position. Beelzebub excitedly flew straight toward him, when suddenly a large hole appeared in his stomach. Around him, birds of light began to appear. Rista immediately understood besides Saya, no one could do this. When those 7 arrows missed Beelzebub, they transformed into birds that pursued him relentlessly. The battle ended. Rosalia was brought down to the ground by Rista. As soon as she saw Saya, she pointed and criticized him. A hero shouldn't win like that. A true hero should confront and win face to face. Saya didn't care to him. These were just the barks of a dog. Knowing she couldn't match Saya, Rosalia didn't say anything more. Beelzebub was dead. Now it was time to clean up the remaining flies. It was also time for Mash and Alulu to enter the battle. The 2 kids' eyes lit up, thinking they would actually fight, but that wasn't the case. Saya only needed Alulu's speed spell to buff Mash so he could collect fly corpses for him. Although she hated to admit it, Rosalia still had something to tell Saya. In the village of Izael, there was a legendary armor, an armor passed down from ancient times to defeat the Demon Lord. If Saya needed it, he should go there and take it. Saya, with his suspicious nature, had to ask repeatedly whether the armor was cursed or not. When Rosalia had left, Rista opened a teleportation portal, inviting Saya to go with her to get the armor right away. Surprisingly, this time Saya actually agreed without demanding to return to the Divine Realm first. As they stepped out of the portal, before them lay the destroyed village of Izael. There was a monster near a man. Saya ran to stand in front of the monster, intending to protect the man. But the man exclaimed that there was no need. This monster was one he had summoned. It turned out this man was Kikupal, one of the Demon Lord's 4 heavenly kings. This time, he had come to destroy the legendary armor. First no sword, and now no armor. How could Saya defeat the Demon Lord now? Rista panicked. The monster's only mission was that to destroy the armor. Defeating Saya was Kikupal's own mission. Knowing he couldn't match Saya in combat, he would use a different method. He pulled out a bag and opened it. terrifying Mash and Alulu when they saw two severed heads inside. These were the heads of his wife and child. He took a knife and stabbed himself in the neck, vowing to sacrifice his family's lives and the entire village of Izael to summon an extremely powerful monster capable of crushing any hero. The magic circle beneath his feet began to glow. Saya turned to tell Rista to quickly open a portal back to the divine realm. Though they didn't know what enemy they would face, they needed to be cautious. Just as he finished speaking, the circle flashed brightly, and from it emerged a monster. This was the Death Mark. Rista immediately checked its information. Its stats weren't high at all. Could it be using a stat concealing skill? Saya didn't think so. It might have other hidden secrets. He drew his sword, sliced the creature in half, and told Rista to open the portal quickly. Although Saya had cut it in two, the monster was able to split its body parts into two identical creatures. The situation wasn't good at all. Saya jumped up, launching continuous attacks to hold it off while urging Rista to open the portal back to the divine realm. Rista quickly complied, only to be kicked straight through by Saya. Afterward, Saya collapsed, claiming he was severely wounded. Rista anxiously wanted to heal him immediately, but somehow he only had a tiny scratch yet still insisted on being treated. Mash remained worried about the monster. Rista, being in the divine realm, wasn't concerned. She was very confident that no one but deities could penetrate this place. Before she could finish her sentence, the death mark tore through space behind them, making Rista's face turn pale with fear. She quickly turned to ask Saya if there was any way to defeat it. Saya's answer was no, which frightened Rista even more. If Saya had given up, wouldn't she be doomed as well? At this moment, three deities of the divine realm appeared. They launched a combined attack, but it had absolutely no effect. Rista turned pale with fear, then saw that Saya had already fled long ago. Rista ran for her life after him. The Death Mark quickly defeated the three deities and pursued them. One by one, deities appeared along the way to impede it: the boxing god, the sumo god, then the water god. All were knocked away. Saya ran past Cerseus, knocking over his cake. Cerseus angrily shouted but fell silent when he saw the Death Mark's shadow, not daring to move at all. Saya met Adanella on the way and asked her to hold it off for him. Being asked by Saya, of course Adanella would help. She drew her sword and slashed the Death Mark into 10 pieces. Somehow it could still multiply, and it beat Adanella to a pulp. Saya watched and could only sigh. As predicted, Adanella was completely useless against it. After criticizing her, Saya abandoned Adanella and continued running. Rista, keeping up, called for Saya to quickly think of a way to defeat it. By now, Saya had also given up his level and skills couldn't defeat it. However, he had prepared in advance a method to fight a monster he couldn't defeat himself. Saya rushed to the top of the church, where Valkyrie liked to paint daily. Saya didn't approach to ask for her help directly, knowing full well that if he asked nicely, she wouldn't fight. So he had to use another method. The Death Mark was right behind them now. Saya stood still, waiting for it to shoot. Then he dodged slightly to the side, causing its projectile to fly straight into Valkyrie's painting. Valkyrie was furious, exactly as Saya had planned, and she crushed the Death Mark's head. Of course, it wouldn't die that easily, so Valkyrie launched another attack. This time she used chains to bind its body tightly, but it was still no use. It easily escaped from the chains. Just when it seemed Valkyrie had run out of options, she suddenly burst into laughter. Then she looked up to the sky and shouted loudly. Immediately, Valkyrie's aura and power surged. Saya checked and had to admire her. All of Valkyrie's stats had increased to their limit. Valkyrie released her full power and created a portal. The Death Mark was imprisoned inside and instantly disintegrated. Seeing Valkyrie collapse, Rista thought she was injured and wanted to run over to help, but Valkyrie stopped her. Valkyrie's entire body began to spew blood. The technique she had just used sealed the monster using her own body, so she was now suffering the backlash. Afterward, Valkyrie stood up and grabbed Rista's chest, blaming her, saying she knew full well that monster was brought by Rista. At that moment, Saya appeared, grabbed Valkyrie's hand, and kicked Rista aside. He had observed Valkyrie's battle very carefully. She was the only one who could train him in this divine realm. Hearing this, Valkyrie looked at Saya with contempt, saying she would never train a human. Saya drew his sword and pointed it at Valkyrie's neck. It seemed he knew some secret about Valkyrie, so she agreed to help him. After Valkyrie left, Mash and Alulu also asked Rista for permission to go to area to learn more, and Rista immediately agreed. As for Saya, he pulled out a stone from his robe, a fragment of the legendary armor. With it and Rista's hair, Saya had synthesized an ultra-hard sword that couldn't be destroyed. At this point, Rista rushed to hug Saya. Saya immediately pushed her away, complaining that she smelled too sour. Rista had to go take a bath. She met Circeus at the gate, who immediately informed her that Ishtar had summoned her regarding the death mark. Rista had to cut her bath short and meet Ishtar, but the goddess didn't blame her at all. This time she had called Rista for another reason. Ishtar showed Rista an image. The demon lord's final heavenly king had made his move. He was leading an army to capture the capital, and Ishtar wanted Rista to bring the hero there to rescue it immediately. Rista accepted the order and wanted to go at once, but Ishtar held her back, saying there was no hurry, there was still time for Rista to take a bath, as she noticed Rista's body odor was a bit sour. The next morning, Rista went to see Arya, her face flushed red. Being criticized by both Ishtar and Saya, she had spent the entire previous day bathing thoroughly. As for Mash and Alulu, the two children had made remarkable progress under Arya's training. Mash could now transform into a complete dragon, while Alulu had learned a new type of magic. After picking up the two, Rista went to find Saya, only to find him sitting naked on a bed with Valkyrie. Rista rushed over to reproach Valkyrie, saying that relations between humans and gods were taboo and not allowed to happen. Then she pulled out a doll from her bag. At first, Valkyrie thought it was a straw doll, but when she realized it was woven from Rista's own hair, Valkyrie immediately left, not expecting Rista to do something so foolish. This made Rista very sad. She had thought making this straw doll would be useful for Saya, but now she had turned herself into a weird goddess. Oh well, never mind. Rista informed Saya that they needed to return to the other world immediately. Saya agreed right away, but Rista was too careless and didn't notice that Saya hadn't said, "absolutely ready," as he always did. The group arrived at the capital, which had become a battlefield. As soon as they saw Saya, the soldiers reported the situation to him. Kaiser, the demon lord's final heavenly king, was leading his army straight here. They had to defend the gate and couldn't let them advance any further. At this point, Kaiser stepped out from the demon ranks. He shouted loudly, calling for the strongest person in the city to fight him. Looking at his stats, they were extremely high, much higher than the other three heavenly kings. One might have thought Saya would have to duel him, but suddenly an old man stepped up to face him. This was the Empire's legendary general. Seeing an old man step forward made Kaiser laugh contemptuously. But he didn't laugh for long, as the old man immediately sliced him to pieces with a single strike. Even Rista was surprised by his strength. Not stopping there, General Walks transformed his sword into a giant blade and delivered another blow to the demon army, turning them to dust. After finishing off the demon army, he turned back to greet Rista's group. Rista was extremely impressed by his power, but thinking about it, if he was so strong, why didn't he participate in defeating the demon lord? Mentioning this, Walks's face changed color, and he fell to his knees. His attendant had to explain. The general was about to enter the infant regression process. Just as he finished speaking, a flash of light appeared, and the elderly general who had been in front of them had transformed into a newborn baby. That wasn't all, his behavior was exactly like a child's too. Walks wet himself in front of the soldiers, and the priest had to help change his diaper. Saya turned to tell Rista to pay attention to his skill. "What kind of strange skill is this?" Rista exclaimed. Just then, Rosalia arrived. It seemed that when in child form, Walks couldn't remember anything. He called Rosalia Big Sister when she was clearly his daughter. Not wanting the soldiers to gossip any further, Rosalia drove them away to work, then turned to explain to Saya's group. This was a curse from the demon lord. Because of this curse, Walks could never leave the capital. She would explain the details later. Rosalia carried Walks away, telling Saya's group to come find her in 2 hours. Saya had no intention of meeting her at this time. He told Rista's group to explore the city a bit more first. In the city, the people were celebrating enthusiastically. Everyone was cheering for the general who had saved their capital. It seemed that only a few people knew about the curse Walks was suffering from. The demon lord's final heavenly king had fallen. Now only he himself remained, but Rista felt something wasn't quite right. At this point, they passed a casino. Some bunny-dressed hostesses invited Rista in to play a few hands. Rista wanted to play badly, but Saya wouldn't allow it. Casinos were forbidden places for a cautious person like Saya. Even a 1% chance of losing was enough for him to avoid such games. As they walked, Saya teased her, saying it was precisely because of her playful nature that Valkyrie called her a third-rate goddess. Just then, Saya saw an herb shop. According to the owner's pitch, these herbs had extremely powerful effects and could heal wounds instantly. Saya was about to buy everything when Rista stopped him. She had healing powers too, so there was no need to waste money like that. The shop owner wouldn't back down, declaring that his herbs were not inferior to any healing spell. Just then, a wounded soldier walked by, and a contest took place between the shop owner's herbs and Rista's divine healing spell. Exactly 1 minute later, Rista had lost. Feeling they had toured the town enough, Saya led the group to the palace to meet Rosalia. Before meeting the king, Rosalia needed to ask about the holy armor first. Saya, with a straight face, told her it had been swallowed by a turtle in the demon lord's army. Then Rosalia told everyone Walks's story. This time, Rosalia had called Saya here because she needed a favor. Her father, Walks, had fought all his life for this empire, so for the time he had left, she wanted him to live peacefully. If, when they met him later, he asked to go fight alongside Saya, she hoped Saya would persuade him to stay home. Saya agreed immediately without thinking. For him, bringing along an old man would only be a burden. Afterward, the group was led by Rosalia inside to meet Walks, who had now returned to his elderly form. After hearing Saya's view, Walks agreed that he would withdraw from the battlefield. Just then, a soldier rushed in to report that the demon lord's remaining forces were still attacking the capital. Hearing this, Walks wanted to lead the army to battle, but was stopped by Saya, who said he would handle it. Walks was the king, so he should just stay and take care of the palace. Saya left Rista to chat with him, while Mash and Alulu would follow him to the battlefield. After Saya left, Walks took Rista to visit the Empire's church. As they walked, Rista complained a lot about the hero Saya. Walks just laughed, saying that the stronger a person was, the stranger they tended to be, and Rista shouldn't worry about what he said. Then he turned to ask Rista if she understood how a deity remains immortal. Rista had no idea about this, so Walks explained. Currently, Rista's body contained only a virtual soul. Her real soul was kept in a room in the divine realm. As long as that soul existed, Rista couldn't die. This applied to Saya as well, the hero summoned from another world. At this point, Walks went behind the divine statue, wanting to show Rista a magical artifact. This artifact could slash through the souls of deities, then create a chain reaction, destroying the person's original soul, regardless of where it was hidden. Walks stepped out holding a god-slaying sword. He pointed at Rista's face, declaring she would die here. The reason was very simple. He had met the demon lord before. At that time, with his strength, Walks thought he could fight him. But the demon lord possessed overwhelming power, making Walks tremble before him. So from then on, he had worshipped the demon lord. For a goddess he had once prayed to, at least Walks would give Rista a peaceful death. With that, he began to attack Rista. She ran for her life, but was quickly subdued by him. In her final moments, Rista could only cry and hope that she could make peace with Saya before dying. Just then, 3 magic arrows flew in, startling Walks. At the church entrance were Mash, Alulu, and Rosalia. Above, Saya had appeared, cutting the vines and kicking Rista back to Mash's group. He faced Walks alone. When asked how he knew about this, Saya just smiled and replied that from the moment he met him, he had formed many possible scenarios, from the heavenly King Kaiser pretending to be dead, to Walks surrendering to the demon lord, and even Rista not being a real goddess. All were just assumptions. But thanks to these assumptions, Saya had arrived in time to save Rista's life. Hearing this, Walks laughed out loud, just because of that absurdly cautious nature. Interesting indeed. At this moment, he suddenly coughed blood, a sign of old age. His final moments were approaching, so Walks didn't hesitate to offer himself to the demons. He took out a pill and swallowed it. Immediately, his entire body transformed, reverting from an old man back to his prime. All his stats surged, making even Rista sweat. Saya rushed forward to exchange techniques with him. While fighting, Walks praised Saya, saying he was quite strong, but this wasn't enough. He knocked away one of Saya's swords, then used magic to blast him. Saya bent his entire body to block the attack. Although he managed to block most of it, he was bleeding for the first time since arriving in this world. Saya had planned to save his trump card for the demon lord, but it seemed this time he couldn't hold back. He began removing the extremely heavy rings he wore on his arms, then called for Mash to throw him another sword. With the dual blades in his hands, Saya infused them with fire power, ready to face Walks. The two rushed at each other ferociously. While fighting, Walks laughed loudly, saying Saya was somewhat better than before, but it still wasn't enough. He had adapted to Saya's sword style. Then Saya began to lose ground. Seeing this, Rista wanted Alulu to use her speed buff on Saya. Not needed, Alulu refused. Saya is cautious, so as soon as we stepped in here, I already buffed him. Mash and Rosalia wanted to rush in to help Saya fight, but he stopped them. They were too weak and would only die if they came. After the recent attack, Saya was still okay and prepared for the next round. Wolks and he rushed past each other, and one of Saya's arms was cut off. Wolks laughed, about to finish Saya, but he could still stand up and block the attack. This surprised Wolks a bit. Wasn't Saya afraid of pain? But it didn't matter. Having lost an arm, his chances of victory were now 0. Saya didn't think so. He wasn't the only one who had lost an arm. As he finished speaking, Wolks' arm also fell off. This was Valkyrie's 9th form technique, using one's own body to reflect all similar damage back onto the opponent. Having lost his sword, Wolks only had his fists left. Yet he still rushed forward to block Saya's sword thrust, resulting in a large hole in his chest. The battle ended. Rista quickly ran over to reattach Saya's arm. After healing him, Saya also asked Rista to heal Wolks. While healing Saya, Rista turned to tell Rosalia to take care of her father. Rosalia refused to acknowledge him as her father since he had sold his soul to demons. Immediately, Saya slapped Rosalia in the face. Shout or curse however you want, but do that when Wolks is dead. For now, talk to him in his final moments. Rosalia burst into tears as Wolks, before dying, still stroked her head and told her he loved her. 3 days later, General Wolks's funeral was held. Rosalia was promoted to queen successor. She would likely be a good queen. As for Saya, he had been sleeping deeply for 3 days with no sign of waking up. This was Rista's opportunity, so she called Mash and Alulu, telling them to go play somewhere now, before the cautious guy woke up. Just as she finished speaking, Saya was already looming behind her. Now Saya wanted to discuss further plans to fight the Demon Lord. This time, in his duel with Wolks, he had barely won. The Demon Lord would certainly be much stronger, so he would need to train more. However, this time there was no rush. Saya allowed the group 2 to 3 days of leisure here, leaving Rista with her mouth hanging open in shock, unable to believe her ears. What Saya said was true. Rista, Mash, and Alulu happily rushed out to the town to find ordinary pleasures, while Saya seemed to be aiming for a different plan. Mash and Alulu followed Rista. They still couldn't believe Saya was letting them have fun like this. Let's take this opportunity to visit the casino and check out the beautiful bunny girls. Rista hugged the 2 children, saying, "If we're going to have fun, we can't dress this plainly. Time to splurge," she shouted. Then she immediately led the 2 kids to a clothing store, letting Mash and Alulu choose whatever they wanted. At this point, Rista noticed the swimwear section. Why are they selling swimwear here when we're so far from the ocean? Rista wondered. Seeing her confusion, the shop owner revealed to Rista that there was a famous hot spring in the capital. Hot springs? Rista's face turned red as she began imagining bathing with Saya. Realizing she was being inappropriate, she quickly composed herself and invited Mash and Alulu to choose swimwear with her. Rista looked around but found only ordinary, unremarkable designs. The tailors in the divine realm are so far ahead of the fashion here, she sighed. Suddenly, a saleswoman appeared behind Rista, having overheard her complaints. She immediately introduced Rista to a swimsuit. There were bottoms but no top in sight. The owner explained this was a topless swimsuit. Rista would only need to wear the bottoms, and she'd be the most eye-catching person in the area. Seeing Rista's disapproval, she introduced another design, a one-sided bra with one side covered and one side not. Even with this bold design, Rista still wasn't satisfied. She yelled at the owner, "I'm not a prostitute to wear something like this." Feeling the owner wasn't seriously helping her, Rista ignored her and turned to ask Mash and Alulu to help choose swimwear for Saya. When the owner learned Rista was accompanied by a man, she immediately introduced a men's swimsuit design with a special cutout, saying with it, Saya could bathe while letting his elephant trunk soak in the water. Rista drooled and immediately decided to buy it, along with the one-sided bra as well, thinking she could wear it at night. The owner was stunned. She had only meant to tease Rista, but never expected her to actually buy these items, so she decided to give Rista a discount. After shopping, Mash said he was hungry. Rista led them back to the palace, planning their fun day as they walked. First, they would eat until full, then go to the casino for a game, then drink at a bar, followed by the hot springs, and finally, she would spend the night with Saya. But when they opened the door to their room, Saya was nowhere to be seen, even though they had agreed to meet in the room at sunset. The group waited for an hour, then 2, but still no sign of Saya. Thinking he might be browsing the general stores, Rista led the 2 kids out to search. She looked in many places but couldn't find Saya anywhere. At this point, Alulu had a bad feeling. Could Saya have gone alone to fight the Demon Lord? Rista was certain this wasn't the case. There was no way that extremely cautious guy would dare to face the Demon Lord when he had barely defeated General Wolks. Rista racked her brains but still couldn't guess what had happened. With no other options, Rista had to use her last resort. She returned to the divine realm to seek Ishtar's help. Pushing open the door to her room, she didn't see Ishtar, only Arya crying. Seeing Rista arrive, Arya led her to meet Ishtar. They entered a room where Ishtar was waiting. Rista immediately recognized it as the soul storage room for deities. Ishtar knew why Rista had come to find her, so she went straight to the main point, informing everyone that Saya had gone alone to fight the demon lord. Hearing this, of course, Rista wouldn't believe it. That guy was too cautious to ever perform such a dangerous action. Ishtar also knew he was cautious, but there was one point Rista was unaware of. Although Saya's words were always sharp and he seemed distant from them, deep down, Saya was always a kind-hearted young man. The demon lord had a god-slaying sword. If Rista went along, she might die too. So Saya had chosen to act alone. The same was true for Mash and Alulu. Ishtar was quite certain the two children would understand Saya's actions, since both had been saved by him once. Rista still didn't believe it. Even if that was the case, there was no need to be so reckless. Saya could have completely returned to the divine realm to train more. At this point, Ishtar displayed Saya's information for Rista to see. Since the Dragon's Cave, all of Saya's levels had already reached the maximum limit. Even so, Saya had still sought to learn skills from Midas and Valkyrie just to find ways to defeat the enemy. Now, returning here to train more would not increase anything further. Ishtar was also quite certain Rista had seen Saya's training with Valkyrie. That wasn't ordinary learning, it was a ritual to transfer control of the power of the Valhalla Gate, Valkyrie's ultimate skill. Rista immediately fell to her knees. No, a human could never use that skill. If used, Saya would have to exchange his own life. At this point, Ishtar firmly asked Rista if she had the courage to accept the truth. Then she opened a portal for Rista to witness again the B-rank difficulty world that Arya had once been assigned to rescue. Surprisingly, the hero summoned to this world was Saya. This Saya seemed different from the current one, not excessively cautious, but very confident in his abilities. Beside his group were Colt and Princess Tiana of the kingdom, companions on the journey to defeat the demon lord. Their current target was a chimera monster. Saya had Colt slow down the monster while he looked for openings to attack. Very soon, Colt was injured. Tiana wanted to heal him, but Arya stopped her, wanting to heal Saya first as he was also severely wounded. The battle was very difficult, but they eventually won. The more they watched, the more Mash and Alulu saw how different Saya was. Then he seemed like a different version of Princess Rosalia. Arya acknowledged this. Saya back then had no preparation at all, always rushing into life or death battles. But despite having a lower level than his opponents, somehow he always emerged victorious. One by one, Saya defeated each monster, until only the demon lord remained. That night, Tiana came to see Saya, advising him to go to the sage village where they would have more information about the demon lord. But Saya refused, not wanting to delay any further. The longer they delayed, the more the world would suffer under the demon lord. Saya was certain everything would be fine again this time. The next morning, the group raided the demon lord's castle. After a long battle, Saya was quite battered. He concentrated his final blow, cutting the demon lord in half. After Arya confirmed his HP had reached 0, everyone sighed in relief. But before they could celebrate, a tentacle pierced straight through Colt's chest. It was the demon lord. He was still alive and grabbed Arya. He laughed loudly, telling everyone he had 2 lives. Losing one still left him with another. Arya was then devoured before Saya's eyes. Only now did Saya admit they should have prepared for this final battle. He pushed Tiana away so she could escape. But it was too late. The demon lord caught Arya. He discovered there was another life in Arya's belly. Is it Saya's child? He laughed out loud, declaring he would pull out the baby to eat first. Then it would be their turn. That's enough. Ishtar turned it off. Turning around, she saw Rista's eyes automatically shedding tears. Yes, Ishtar was quite certain Rista now recognized her own identity. She was Princess Tiana from the past. Thanks to the good deeds she had done while alive, after death, Rista had become a deity. Of course, neither she nor Saya remembered what had happened in the past. Rista summoning Saya to save the S-rank world wasn't coincidental, it was the destiny of the two. Unable to wait any longer, Rista decided she had to go to Saya. Opening a portal directly to the demon lord's castle was against the rules. But at this point, Rista didn't care anymore. She was ready to accept any punishment. Mash and Alulu were also determined to go along. They had been saved by Saya, and it was time to repay him. Passing through the teleportation gate, Rista arrived at the demon lord's castle. As soon as she set foot there, she could sense it indeed. The demon lord had a god-slaying sword. There was the sound of fighting. The group quickly ran to check. It turned out Saya was already facing the demon lord. Seeing Rista arrive, Saya immediately used his final trump card, ignoring Rista's attempts to stop him. He summoned the Valhalla Gate to imprison the Demon Lord. At first, the Demon Lord was confident he could escape using his magic resistance, but it had no effect whatsoever. His god-slaying sword also shattered upon touching the Valhalla Gate. The gate began to pierce through his body and closed. The Demon Lord screamed in pain. Just when it seemed he had resigned to his fate inside, somehow the Demon Lord transformed into a pitch-black monster, trying to break the Valhalla Gate to escape. This was completely within Saya's calculations. This was an S-rank difficulty world. There was no way the Demon Lord would submit so easily. Saya began to channel fire into his sword. He lunged forward, stabbing the Demon Lord in the stomach. It had absolutely no effect since it wasn't the holy sword. The Demon Lord punched Saya once, making him cough blood, but this didn't make Saya give up. He pulled out another sword and began a storm of attacks. The Demon Lord still exposed his face for Saya to hit, not believing Saya could damage him with that old sword, until his body began to spurt blood, startling him. Before him appeared a doll. Rista immediately recognized it as the doll she had given to Saya. So Saya had prepared a method for this case. The thorns from the Valhalla Gate could damage the Demon Lord. Saya had used them combined with Rista's hair to create another sword capable of defeating him. It was over. Saya charged forward, thrusting his sword straight into the Demon Lord's forehead. The sword pierced through his body, and at that moment, the Demon Lord was swallowed by the Valhalla Gate. After that blow, Saya was also exhausted. Rista rushed over to check on him. Having used the forbidden skill, Saya's body had begun to suffer backlash, with blood flowing everywhere. Saya couldn't even sit up anymore, lying flat on the floor. Rista couldn't let Saya die so easily. He had promised to go to the casino with her, to drink at the bar with her. She raised her hand to the sky, requesting to unleash all her goddess powers. At this moment, Ishtar's voice echoed down, reminding Rista that just opening a portal directly to the Demon Lord's castle was already a serious offense. Now she wanted to unleash her powers too. Ishtar wasn't sure she could cover for Rista anymore. Rista heard but still decided to go through with it. She believed she had been chosen as a goddess for this day. Seeing Rista's determination, Ishtar didn't stop her anymore and unsealed Rista's full powers. Immediately, Rista ran to heal Saya. She healed him, but the wounds reopened. Rista then buffed her healing power even more, determined to save Saya this time. After a while, Saya's wounds finally closed. As Saya hazily awoke, Rista rushed over to kiss him. One might have thought Saya would be moved by her life-saving grace, but no. Saya tapped her head and pushed Rista away. In truth, Saya was quite surprised, not believing Rista could save him in that state. Now Saya finally acknowledged that Rista was truly a healing goddess. At this point, Alulu's face turned pale as she called to Saya, "Why hasn't the Valhalla Gate disappeared yet?" As soon as she finished speaking, the Valhalla Gate began to pound violently. From inside, a deformed head flew out. It was the Demon Lord. He wouldn't accept defeat so easily and was trying to drag the entire world down with him. The head began to accumulate enormous energy. Rista closed her eyes in fear. That amount of power was enough to destroy the world. Would they die here? At this moment, Saya continued to use the Valhalla Gate skill, pulling the Demon Lord's head back into the gate. The gate closed, and Mash wondered if this was truly the end. Suddenly, the head attached to the top of the Valhalla Gate began to speak, declaring that this time, the Demon Lord had truly vanished into nothingness, and it was also time for Saya to pay the price. Saya's body began to suffer backlash. Rista anxiously ran over to heal him, but this time was different from before. Her recovery speed couldn't keep up with the destructive speed in Saya's body. Mash wanted Rista to take Saya back to the divine realm, away from the god-slaying sword. If they could do that, when Saya died, he would return to his original world. Rista wanted to do this badly, but couldn't. If she stopped healing for even a second, Saya would immediately vanish. At this point, Saya smiled, praising Alulu and Mash. The two had assisted him very well. There was nothing to criticize. This world had now lost the 4 heavenly kings and the Demon Lord. No one could defeat them anymore. Saya hoped they could follow Rista to protect this world. Next was Rista. Seeing her crying so hard, Saya hugged her. In that very moment, Saya remembered everything from the past. He smiled. "Fortunately, this time I saved Rista." With that, Saya vanished. After Saya's death, Rista's group returned to the imperial capital. The hero who had saved the world was gone forever. Upon hearing this news, Rosalia finally acknowledged that Saya had truly done what she couldn't. He was a true hero of the Empire's people. Mash and Alulu, the two with dragon blood, would stay and join the Royal Knights, continuing to protect the kingdom in place of their late teacher. As for Rista, it was time for her to return to the divine realm. After saying goodbye to everyone, Rista opened a portal. Rosalia led the soldiers to escort Rista out in the most respectful manner. Rista returned to her room. Thinking of how Mash and Alulu had suddenly become so mature made Rista very happy. Suddenly, she felt Saya's presence behind her. She rushed to his old house to look, but he wasn't there either. At this point, Rista sadly fell to her knees. Was she missing Saya too much? Rista lay flat on the bed, not even getting up when someone knocked. Arya had to unlock the door herself to enter. She came to inform Rista that Ishtar wanted to see her. Seeing her sister looking so haggard, Arya combed her hair, encouraging Rista. This time, Ishtar wanted to meet Rista to discuss the responsibility of unleashing divine power. But Rista had successfully rescued a world with S-rank difficulty. Arya was certain they wouldn't punish Rista severely. After preparing, Arya led Rista with her. On the way, they met Adanella, who came to encourage Rista. Cerseus also, knowing Rista was sad, had even made a cake for her. Midas was also present, but was sent back to the forest by Arya. All the deities cared about Rista, but after everything she had been through, she couldn't be as cheerful as before. Just as they stepped out of the elevator, they met Valkyrie. Seeing Rista, Valkyrie approached and patted her shoulder, encouraging her to cheer up. Although the hero had died, she didn't regret teaching Saya that technique. After all, Saya had used it to save people. Arya led Rista in to meet Ishtar, who went straight to the point. Rista's crime was too great for Ishtar to cover up. So the Divine Council had given Rista a punishment. The punishment would be to rescue a world with SS rank difficulty. Hearing this, Arya immediately begged Ishtar to let her go instead of Rista. The world Ishtar mentioned was the very world where Arya had failed years ago. The Demon Lord had defeated the hero and controlled the entire world. That world was now no different from a living hell. Despite Arya's pleas, Ishtar couldn't agree. This was a punishment specifically for Rista. If she didn't comply, she would be permanently stripped of her divine title. Arya burst into tears, feeling it was unfair to Rista that world was too difficult for a goddess like Rista. But Ishtar saw it as simple. She stood up and began to recount the process of defeating the Demon Lord. When the Valhalla Gate occurred for the second time, the effect of the god's slaying sword had also been taken away by the gate. Rista's eyes lit up, seemingly understanding what she meant. Normally, a person wasn't allowed to go to the same world twice. But this would be a special case. Ishtar magically brought down a form in front of Rista. It was Saya's registration form. Just this once, Ishtar was making an exception to allow Rista to summon Saya again, to continue rescuing that SS rank difficulty world together. However, Saya's stats would be much lower than before. Rista looked at the form and indeed it was so. But there was one point that still made her laugh in the characteristics section. He was still listed as excessively cautious.